Hello everyone. Welcome to the amFOSS podcast, Arvind. I'm glad you're here. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me here. I'm pretty excited to be chatting with everybody. How are you guys doing?
We're doing fine in this pandemic. I think we're trying to cope up with everything. How about you, Pavitra?
Yeah. College has been very hectic,
Mm.
assignments, quizzes, the usual, but I'm getting used to it. I mean, I think this is all I know about college so far. It's kind of routine now at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a
Yeah.
year, so you should be kind of used to it by now.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
starting
yeah.
videos.
Exactly. How is it in Arizona? How is your PhD going?
So we have actually started opening up here. I don't know if you know. So many places. So starting from this semester, classes are all mostly in person. I want to say. I think they left the choice to whoever is teaching. So if they want to go kind of combined online in person, that's up to them to decide. So but mostly things are opening up here.
Oh, that's great. Think maybe we may have a little chance in November for our college.
Hmm.
So we're just keeping our fingers crossed for
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
the
rumors
college
going
to
around.
reopen.
Nothing official yet.
I am
Mm.
kind of optimistic it would start opening up there next semester, but
Hmm.
we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
all we can do is hope.
Exactly.
exactly. So how is your PhD
Oh
studies
yeah,
going on?
sorry,
Is it
I
going
missed that. Yeah.
well? No, no problem.
So I am right now in 2 years. No, I'm closing, finishing 3 years of my PhD here.
Oh, right.
It's going. That's all I can say. As, because unlike other degrees, PhD does not have a kind of fixed endpoint. I want to say, like at least in an undergrad, you can say 4 years, you take this many classes and you're done. A PhD is more like, okay, you do good work and then you're done. So there's no frame of reference to say I'm almost there. But I can definitely say I'm not almost there. I'm still. There are some minimum requirements that we need to satisfy. I'm definitely not anywhere near that, so it's not going to get over anytime now. As for
I
how
see.
it's going, it's going. That's all I can really say. It's at least going. That much I can say. It's not stagnating. That's the way it works with a PhD, unlike an undergrad degree or a master's degree.
Right. So, I mean, has there been any anything different in the online mode with your with your PhD studies per se?
Oh, so not so much. I mean, I had to take some classes, and those classes obviously were online. But those classes are just like any regular classes that even you probably have. There are lectures, assignments, exams. That's mostly the same. A good thing about PhD, which may also be a bad thing in many ways, is that it's mostly individual work. As in, you are kind of, I mean, you do work, collaborate with other people, but majority of the weightlifting is done by you. That means, you're sitting in front of a computer in a room somewhere or sitting in a lab and working somewhere. It tends to be the same, I want to say. But of course, they're all computer science people, so all we really need is one computer, a good internet connection, and yeah, we can just work
Yeah.
even if it's in
Exactly.
the middle of the forest. So not so much, but it does make it a little difficult when you have to meet and talk to other people and discuss things. But just like you,
Mhm.
we just adapt
Yeah.
and keep figuring our way around. With that, I
Mhm.
mean, that is something I've always picked up from Force Club. Just
Mhm.
adapt to circumstances, try to be kind of flexible. Because otherwise, they're going to be like, okay, I just want to go one track and this is how it has to be. And then COVID happens, everything just goes for a toss. You either adapt or, yeah, you will eventually have to adapt.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, does it ever get frustrating? You said PhD doesn't have like a fixed time frame. So, does that not knowing when it's going to end, does that get frustrating?
Not quite, at least not for me. I know that there are people who sometimes find it that way, and I know that PhD has a reasonably high, okay, well, not reasonably high, but it has a pretty good attrition rate compared to maybe undergrad degrees. Most people who start a PhD will definitely reach, sorry, most people who start an undergrad will definitely reach the end. But that may not necessarily be the case with many people. I know that some people I think some people I know here did eventually also drop out of PhD for various reasons. So yeah, the dropout rate is there, but I don't think that's a big deal for me because I was kind of clear why I am here for the PhD, why I'm actually here, why I'm actually doing. That's objective, that goal kind of keeps you going, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, I'm kind of a person like, okay, we have at least started this, we are maybe halfway there, I want to say.
Yeah.
Might as well just go the rest of the distance rather than just abandon it in the middle, you know.
Yeah,
But
Right.
definitely.
But
Yeah.
really, it's just that the goal I have on understanding of the purpose of why we started that kind of keeps me going.
That's actually a great point, and a great point to just like keep in mind whenever you're pursuing anything, isn't it? Like to have a definite goal and definite purpose, because that's what keeps you going. It's a
Yeah,
great aspect.
because otherwise you're just like, okay, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what's happening. I'm just here sitting in the lab, just doing something. You're just going directionless. That's not good. Right? But at the same time, if your goal is, uh, I want to say, too unrealistic in some ways, that is also, you need to have a reasonable goal, right? You can't be like, okay, I just need to set any goal and that's going to happen. That's not necessarily true. Like you can have an inspiring goal, like, oh, I want to play for the Indian national cricket team, right? It's a worthy goal to have, but that goal is a kind of a lofty goal to reach, right? Not many people make it. So it's important to be kind of realistic also where you are, what you can do, what is realistic for you. I think that is important to be like. It's not that you can have the goal of working for playing for the international cricket team. There's nothing wrong in that, right? But it's just that maybe for some people it's not a realistic goal. You kind of need to be realistic with what expectations you can have, and then work towards it. At least
Yeah.
that's the way I
I
see
think
Right.
it.
like this never give up mentality is pushed a lot. But I think there's also value in being able to recognize like, okay, now it's time to call it quits and like move on
Right.
and
It's
explore
and
other
that's
options.
not wrong. That's what a
Yeah.
lot of people sometimes have trouble accepting. I think I don't know. I may not be an expert in it, but I think a lot of people have trouble accepting that okay, this is probably not going to work. I should probably go look at something else. It's important to
Right.
know when you're done. This is not going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's also important to know that you should not quit too early. That is going to also mess things up. There's that
Yeah.
fine balance somewhere in the middle, which I have no idea how you find. I don't know if anybody knows how to find, but I'm hoping somebody knows how to
Not
find.
me.
I mean,
Same here.
it just happens. I don't think that's something that you need to be too, just take it as it comes and figure it out that way, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ada, I have a question for you. So you
hmm
are 2012 batch, I believe.
Yeah, 2008 to 2012.
Yeah, so that was a really long time back. So obviously the club has changed a lot since then. So like could you give us some insight into how the club was like back in your time?
Okay. So obviously, one very big difference compared to now and back then would be just the sheer number of people that were there. I think now the club probably gets, well, I think the FOSS club alone gets maybe like 20 people ish every year, I want to say, maybe even
Roughly.
more. Uh, Back when I was there, I think both the FOSS club and BIOS, I was originally kind of in both sort of scenario. I think both put together probably had only like 20 people. That might be a little bit of a stretch. Yeah, it was like 1/5 or 1/6 of the number that is there in the club in total right now today. It was pretty small, right? So obviously that small thing, it has its own benefits, it has its own drawbacks. That's it's just the way we started off. I joined probably in like the very early days, not immediately after the club was founded, but maybe like a year or a year and a half after the club was founded. So the club originally started off with the Sun Code for Freedom contest, which I'm sure most people already know about. So that eventually led to the formation of the FOSS Club, and so it was very small. And like today, you have an entire computer. Okay, of course, we haven't been there, but today most of the work happens in one of the large computer labs on campus. We had like a small corridor, maybe like 10 or 15 meters long, and maybe like 5-6 meters wide. We had like 5 desks or 6 desks in there, and some makeshift desks set up just to get things working. Uh, yeah, it was pretty small. It was pretty compact. I want to say to be a little bit more positive, but it was pretty. Yeah, it was pretty tightly packed. I want to say, right? We also didn't have a lot of facilities like what is there on campus today. We didn't have that working space was obviously not our own, or like not dedicated for the lab. It was like we had temporarily conquered it when there was this possibility of being thrown out at any point of time. That did actually happen after a few years because they hired more people to work as employees and they needed dedicated space. So that meant anybody who's not an employee gets kicked down the list
I
in the
see.
priority order. So we eventually did get kicked out of that place, and then we had to like scavenge around for a classroom that was open and just set up in there and just continue working, which is even more difficult because I don't know if you haven't seen the classrooms, but the classrooms are constructed in a very, let's say, not a very ideal manner in some ways. They have very limited power sockets, or at least back then that was the case. I don't know if it is still the case. And the power socket is never close to where the fan is. So you can imagine how difficult it is when it is summer. You either have a choice between the fan or the power socket, and you have to like
Wow.
shuttle between them when you're in that heat. Yeah, it was fun. It was a nice experience for us, coming through all that struggles and stuff. But I wouldn't say that that's something that anybody else should ever go through. And we kind of made sure that doesn't happen again by trying to push for more dedicated space. And that did eventually happen in like 1 or 2 years time after I graduated.
I see. So, like in your time, amFOSS wasn't really big, like you
Mhm.
mentioned.
Right.
So, what really drew you to the club? What was um, the incentive? What did you really hear about the club that made you feel like, oh, I really want to join this?
Hmm. So I unlike today when we have like dedicated programs where we talk to the first years who come in and say, hey, look, we have this club, we do all these things. It's a very nice place to be. If you want to join us, please come us. There was no recruiting that was happening at that time. I was, as in, well, at least for me, that's not how I came to into the club. There was no recruiting when I was joining, but after I joined, we made sure that next year we actually go talk to people. So that was, I kind of started or at least I was there when the whole recruiting process started. So the way I entered Force Club was, well, it's a very nice story. So I was in my first semester, somewhere midway through it, and I had this person who was teaching the electrical and electronics lab. I don't know if you have that course till now. I'm not familiar with. Do you still have it?
We
It's
had
called
that
the.
Yeah, yeah,
in
we do.
some semester. We had that course. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Electrical
it should be
engineering.
done. If
Yeah.
you had it, it would have been
Yeah.
in first year. So there was this person who was teaching the lab component of that for us. His name is Akshay Nagarajan. He's a good friend of mine. So he was teaching that when I was actually in his class. So uh, you of course you haven't been to campus. So on campus we have these big notice boards scattered around where they post flyers of contests that other institutions or other companies are organizing, where college students can participate. So I used to just keep reading these notice boards. I was just curious what is going on. I was just exploring. Yeah, I had some exposure to computer science. I was just like, okay, we should probably do some stuff like this. It sounds fun. So one day I was looking at this notice board and there was this competition. Some contest by HP. I think I had no idea what it was, and the flyer made no sense to me. So then I saw him. I saw Akshiji walk by. So I asked him, "Do you know what this is?" Right? And he said, "Okay, I don't really know what this is, but I think it's time we go meet somebody." I'm going to introduce you to a person who works in ARL. It's Vipin sir. I had no idea who that was at that time. So he said, okay, come on, let's go meet him. So he just tracks me along. We're going down from the ground floor up to the ARL office, which is somewhere on the second or the third floor. Interestingly, on the way, I saw another friend of mine from my class. You probably know him, Rahul Krishnan. So
Oh
I
yeah.
saw him walking down on the. He was going down the other way when we were walking this way. So I asked him, "Hey, we are going to meet this person to talk about this contest. Do you want to come?" And he said, "Okay, yeah, I'll also come." So the two of us went. I
Oh, okay.
literally just saw him on the way. Asked him, and we just, both of us just went there, and we met Vipin sir, and I think he asked us a lot of questions of what we are interested in, what we like to do, why are we here, what are we studying, and why did you take computer science? Kind of the typical questions that he used to ask for any new person that he meets to get an idea of what they do. I think we sat there talking to him. I think it was supposed to be only like 15 minutes. I think that we 15 minutes that we actually talked to him. I think it ended up going for more than an hour. We were just sitting there talking about various things. He was telling us about the Code for Freedom, the CTF team, yeah. And then he said, okay, just give this. I told him I was kind of interested in security, and he said, okay, sounds good. Why don't you? We have this team here. They participate in these competitions, and then some of those members were there actually at that time. So he said, why don't you come by and give this a shot, and we'll see how it goes. So there was no plan. I didn't even know something like FOSS Club existed when I joined campus. It was just this very chance meeting that happened, and things just happen from there. That's it.
Nice. That's an
It's
interesting story.
actually funny that you mentioned Rahul Aitan. He was our first
Yeah.
guest on the podcast.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, a good friend of mine. We were in the same batch as you probably know.
And also, you mentioned that you didn't know about the FOSS Club, but like now a lot of people actually join the college just to be a part of the
About
FOSS
the
Club.
club.
So I
Hmm.
think that's a testament to like how much amFOSS has grown over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. I think it's just. I think if you'd asked me like I don't know 10 years ago, you'd come and told me that people are going to come join the Amarthapuri campus just to join the FOSS Club. I probably would have said, yeah, sure, okay. We'll see when it happens. I would have been very skeptical about it, but I'm amazed that it has reached this far and it's become this good, really.
So I'm sure that during your time there, you would have made a lot of amazing memories. So could you share like your favorite memory of the club with us?
Oh man, favorite memory of the club. Okay, let me see. Uh there probably some that I can remember of. Let's see. Maybe so. Uh, oh yes. So it's Navaratri now. So that's a very nice thing. So 1 year. I think it was probably my final year. We were all just some of the first club members were on campus. We didn't go home, while most of the other friends of ours they all went back home because it's a nice 3 to 4 day long vacation. So most people just go home. So we were all there on campus, and you know that on the Navami day slash Ashtami night slash Navami day, we don't really do any studying and stuff. It's puja and things like that, right? So we didn't go to the lab, and then suddenly I think someone had this idea. I don't know who had this idea. We decided, hey, why don't we do a puja in the lab, like on the 10th day? And it's like, some people found it, what in the lab really? But I think finally, I think everybody got convinced, and we actually did. We did everything. We had the sandalwood paste, the kumkum, everything. We put it on all our computers that we use. We did a small puja in the lab. We even made prasad. I think it was aval. We probably know it as poha. It's
Yeah, the rice flakes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we made some prasad out of that with some bananas, aval, poha, and I think some more fruits that we made. We just quickly came up with our own thing. Yeah, it's just spontaneously happened, but that was quite fun. I think that was the only time it ever happened because that was the lab where we could do all of that stuff. After that, we moved to the actual computer labs. We had some restrictions on what we can actually do in those labs. So I think that never happened after that. I used to play a lot of CTFs. So CTFs are security capture the flag competitions for anybody who's listening who doesn't know. So we used to play a lot of these competitions, and most of these contests. So this is a completely different episode. The other one is done, in case it wasn't clear. So these competitions usually happen at night because they are usually run by teams that are either based in US or based in Europe. So it would start at like 8:30, maybe even 9 in the night, and it would go on till maybe like 3 a.m., sometimes maybe 4 or 5 a.m. So on all these times these contests happened, we used to be on campus because we didn't have, so at that time we didn't have internet in the hostel. So the only way that we could actually participate in this was actually to stay back on campus. So we used to be there overnight on campus, usually playing these things. So especially on the days when it gets over at like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, we would have nothing else to do, right? So we'd be walking around campus because we're bored. We have to try not to fall asleep or at least something. So some of us, we used to crash inside the lab. We had some space, or whoever, we took turns to sleep and stuff, and we'd be walking around on campus at night. It's pitch dark. It's nobody on campus except maybe the security guard. Sometimes, it used to be early in the morning, like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Some people would be hungry, so we just all go walk out, eat something in one of the restaurants that was nearby, and then come back. This happened quite regularly, like, I don't know, once every month, once every 6 weeks. That was fun, but it was also not fun just because we were staying back on campus and nobody was there. It's like we were actually, doing things that, well, most people, or even we hadn't learned any of this in the class. We used to like figure it out on the fly. Like they give us one thing, task to do, we'd sit and learn. Like I remember one time I was sitting and they gave some challenge that had something to do with Haskell. It was a programming language. It's a very not so good programming language. It's very difficult to comprehend because it has a lot of interesting computer science concepts that are built into, which actually makes development much easier. But it requires a little shift in thinking. So I spent the entire night just learning whatever I can about some concept in Haskell that I'd never heard of. It was, yeah, I didn't get much. I didn't make any progress of it. But those kind of like learn swimming by diving into the deep end kind of approach that we eventually had to resort to. That was fun in its own way, I want to say.
That's nice. Like, that's a great memory to have. I think those I really, to be very honest, I'm quite jealous of the nights, the walks that you have at night. I mean, a lot of seniors, even in the club, have mentioned that to be like this really great aspect of their time in college. So, like, just spontaneous walks with, and everyone in the club, and just talk about what they've done that day.
Yes, I think that was
That's
actually, incidentally, now to mention, that was actually something that we enjoyed doing a lot. So because we used to be in the lab together, and of course, right now, for anybody who has been on campus, you know that the mess halls are close to the hostels, right? Right now, back when we were studying, the mess hall was very close to the campus itself, actually. So everybody used to come there. So we used to be on campus. Everybody used to, everybody who was there in the lab, we'd all go together for dinner and things like that. So naturally we had that time of walking to dinner, coming back from dinner. We used to chat a lot. It was always these kind of things that, and working in the lab was of course a lot of fun, but it's always also these nice small conversations that we used to have about various things. That really also was a big deal, when a big factor in us just sticking around and continuing that, because being motivated and just continuously working can be pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Maybe you probably also know, especially in this online course, I think it's a little bit more challenging than usual.
yeah,
Yeah, I
trying to get
think,
together,
yeah.
through meetings. Pavitra and I, like, since we're the first online batch, anything that we need to schedule, anything we need to talk about, we need to schedule a meeting. So
Yeah, I know.
yeah,
Yeah. We can't just like spontaneously walk up to a person and strike a conversation. Everything is very planned now, which has
yeah,
its pros and cons, but yeah, to work with it.
There
Yeah.
are other ways also you can have. So, like some of the things that we do here. So not everybody here comes to the lab. So some people are still working remote. So one thing that we kind of do is we have this virtual lounge area kind of thing. It's basically just a voice channel. So anybody who's just working now, you just be there, just connected to the voice channel. And when somebody's just bored, you just start talking, and then someone turns on the stream, and then you start chatting even more. It's an approximate simulation. It's still not the same as just sitting in the same room and just walk across and start talking.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we actually have Discord servers now with voice channels, which are open to all of us. But still, we kind of like a lot of people
Yeah,
don't use it that regularly, so we
Yeah.
there is,
still need to schedule meetings.
exactly. There is like, I feel a slight hesitation to just start. I think once it's in the, once we start talking, that's fine. But like just initially for everyone to just start the conversation on the voice channel, I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
a bit of a challenge I've seen.
I mean, starting troubles are there for almost anything that you can think of. It's
Yeah,
not
that's
just
true.
this.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of doing it, I guess.
Absolutely.
And Ada, you were also mentioning about like learning things on the fly during like hackathons and stuff.
Mhm.
I think even now, like that's one of the things that like amFOSS has taught. Like it's one of the key things that we're taught, like learning how to learn and like making use of the resources, be it like books or our mentors or seniors, and even the internet. I think that's very valuable.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, I think that was one of the main things that we realized very early on in the club. It was one of the things that Vipin sir really emphasized on. Uh, and maybe even all the other seniors also, because they also were working with him initially. So he said technology kind of keeps evolving every year. I have seen generational shifts in like the past 10 or 15 years. When some new thing comes up, it's like the big in thing at that time. Everybody is rushing towards it. And then it just kind of plateaus after a while, and then it just like a big sharp decline, and it suddenly just goes. Then suddenly nobody's talking about it. And then it slowly starts rising again. And then another new thing comes up. Like when I started, I think a few years in, Android was like a very big deal. IoT eventually also became a very big deal. Now everybody does Android apps. It's fairly common, right? So I think the thing is that trends keep coming, technology keeps coming, technology keeps going. What is really useful is being able to adapt in these circumstances. When something new comes up, you just take it, figure out how to understand, figure out how to learn, and then find your way around. I think that is a skill which is going to be useful no matter what. Just being able to do the same thing, dive into the deep end, figure out how to start floating. I think that's a very useful skill to have, regardless of what you're actually interested in. It applies even to anything other than computer science, I would say.
Right. So, are there any techniques that you have followed to quickly adapt to this changing world that we live in?
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think there is any standard formula as such, I
Hmm.
want to say, because the key reasoning is something like this. If one reason why it's very challenging is because how do you know how to prepare for some scenario that's going to happen in future when you don't even know what's going to happen, right? You have
yeah,
Right.
absolutely no idea how things. I mean, if you know something, if you know this is going to be a problem in future, you can obviously plan for it, prepare for it, get ready, do all the spade work, and be ready when it's going to happen. But what if you don't know it's going to happen? You don't
yeah,
even know what is going to happen, let alone when it's going to happen, right? So the idea is you slow, and there is no standard way because you don't even know what is going to happen. Then how do you prepare yourself to adapt to something when you don't even know how things are going to play out? One way, and this is something that I at least used to do in FOSS Club, I think many people still do in FOSS Club, is to start taking small risks slash chances to go out of your comfort zone and learn something that you don't know. Like for me, when I came to campus in 2008, the only operating system that I had ever used was Windows. That's all I was ever familiar with. All campus computers had both Windows and Linux, which I thought, okay, I know this Windows is there, we can still make do with everything. Until I realized that half the classes they don't teach on Windows, they only teach on Linux, right? So I had no choice
Okay.
at that point of time. I had to learn Linux, right? So at that point, I said, okay, let's give this a shot. I just started diving in. So taking that small step made me a little confident that okay, this is not too bad. I can search online and figure something out, or I found out that Linux had its own documentation. It's called the man pages for anybody who doesn't know. You read the man page and you start figuring things out, because that's like very detailed documentation on everything about one specific program. All information you need is in there. So really the only
Mhm.
way I think is you start pushing yourself out of that established comfort zone that you have, and be comfortable doing things when you have no idea what is going on. Because really, I think the problem isn't that. I think most people are somewhat skilled and they can figure out things, what is happening, and so forth. The problem is that the mental, I don't know, strength or something of that sort to just dive into something that you have absolutely no idea of and start figuring out.
Mhm.
I think that is an aspect which is more important than most things. As long as you don't have any inhibitions in you and like, oh no, this is too scary, I have no idea what this is, how can I start doing something when I have absolutely no idea what this is, that tendency tends to hold you back a lot. So being able to break that barrier with things that are very simple to do, which are not very difficult to do, sort of makes you more ready to do other things. It's like when you are when you want to lift a heavy load, right? One fine day they
Mhm.
ask you to lift a lot of load, it's not going to be easy. But if you're slowly training up your muscle to be able to bear that load, then when it actually happens, it's not very difficult to do. I think that's kind of how I ended up doing in FOSS Club when I reflect on how things were. I think that's a good way to work. Maybe somebody knows a better way, but I think this is something that still would work in most cases.
Yeah, that's a great perspective on how to approach a problem. I that's I mean, I think I could relate a lot to what you were saying, especially when something looks so intimidating. um I think the field that we're in is changing so fast. Everything tends to look intimidating anyway. So I think that's a great aspect. That's a great point to keep in mind. Like, do small steps and then eventually make your way to actually solving it, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like if you like when we were all small, or if you have seen babies, right? They all take small steps at a time. And they kind of find their way around. Sometimes they fail, sometimes they fall, right? But they are not somehow negatively affected by it. They
Oh
still
yeah.
kind of keep going. Like, oh yeah, I fell down, and you just keep going. You should notice, and at least I have noticed, babies usually start crying when you start making signs that something actually
Yeah.
went wrong, right? If you give them
Exactly.
the idea that nothing is wrong, everything is fine, they'll just like, let's go, right? That is the kind of same thing. You
Right.
just dust off your sleeves and you start going. It's a man. I think it's a more of a. I think there is at least a mental aspect to it, even if that's not the only thing.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of this societal um sort of pressure to do good. You can't really, you know, they don't, it's not, failure is not embraced as much as success, obviously. And I
More
think
rather, I
that's
think.
sort of,
Yeah, sorry, go on.
yeah.
No, I
uh,
think that's actually a very good point. Because I think somehow we all everything. If you probably look at least when I started college, it was all about success and like most people. If you see who come out of high school and start joining university, they probably had decent scores in most subjects that they had. Um, they did pretty well in all their exams. They did kind of well in their entrance exams. Probably got the seat that they wanted. They've probably never tasted a lot of failure in life. I don't think it's a societal pressure. I think it's just the way it is. We somehow have some kind of an aversion to failure. It's like, no, no, you can't fail, you can't take risks and things of that sort. The thing is, at least life kind of works that way. There is no certainty to how things were. Anything can happen at any point of time. COVID is like a really good example. It's just circumstances are just beyond your control. What can happen? And I think when you've just tasted a lot of success in life, and suddenly you hit upon a failure, you just crack at that. You just don't know how to handle it. You just crack, and that's it. And then it's unfortunate how today that these aspects of life and being prepared for it, being able to handle it, they're not it doesn't get as much attention. So that's also a very nice thing that you can kind of pick up from having been in FOSS Club. I feel at least I
Yeah,
picked up to some extent, even if not a lot.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely very helpful having this like judgment-free zone like amFOSS.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Oh
and
yeah.
like even we have things like, I mean, this isn't the best representation, but like we have things like force talks and like
Mhm.
debates where like we're expected to speak on the spot. And like a lot of people aren't comfortable with public speaking, especially impromptu. So like putting yourself out there and like being able to express your views and like not really knowing how that's going to go. It's like risk taking and seeing that like even if you mess up, it's all right. You have a
But
chance to try
yeah,
again. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think FOSS Club is actually a very nice sandbox in many ways. You can just experiment around and try new things out, try a lot of things, and you just make your way up from there. I think that was one of the visions that at least we used to have. I'm
Yeah.
guessing that still hasn't changed by what you said.
And even like learning from other people's failures, like we have mentor mentee system now, like so we have student mentors, so we can kind of like see, okay, they did this and like they had this journey and they experienced this failure, so we can learn from that, which is definitely helpful.
Yeah, I think that was kind of eventually what we arrived at some point of time, like because we went through a lot of things, trial and error, and uh, we figured out, okay, this is probably going to work, this is probably not going to work, this is the way to do, this is the way not to do, and that kind of generationally got handed down. Which is, if you look at how the real world works, that's also how most of it works. Right? We have a lot of generational knowledge that we learned from people who were there before us. Science works that way. You build upon what other people have done instead of just going back and reinventing everything again. You kind of use that knowledge and then continue building up from there. That's how it should be, right? Because if you're going to make the same mistakes and then 5 years later the people who are coming in, they're making the same mistakes again, that's not good.
Mhm.
But one problem, however, that happens in this, and this may happen, is that sometimes other people may not do something, and then you can kind of just stick to the same thing and not do anything outside of that. It's like there is an established path, and you sort of going down that path that is often walked by many people because that leads to success. When as opposed to trying something that you know breaking from the mainstream, I want to say, just not following something that anybody has already done, that is also important. So you kind of need a balance between both. Can't be like, oh, my mentors told me this is how it is. They're not like gospel truth or anything, right? You learn from them, but at the same time you also have to kind of think for yourself, I want to say, and not necessarily be like, oh, they're 100% correct all the time. Maybe early on when you start, that is probably true. But as you keep progressing, maybe you should start exploring things on your own. Because if you're going to come into FOSS Club and do the same thing what everybody else has done, I think that kind of defeats the purpose of
Yeah.
being prepared to adapt to failures and things like that.
So Eta, in your time at amFOSS, I believe you did cybersecurity.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, not exactly. I kind of actually did both in some ways. So I was actually there in amFOSS, recruiting, mentoring people for contributing to open source projects, contributing to GSOC. I actually had most of my beginnings were like that in FOSS Club. I was mostly only playing those competitions, the security competitions that happen when they do. But a lot of my work was actually in the FOSS Club. Most of my second, third year, I want to say even a good part of fourth year was spent primarily doing FOSS club activities. So I used to be mentoring, recruiting. We used to run the whole club, kind of the day-to-day running of the club.
So, what really inspired you to get into cybersecurity, or why did you decide on pursuing cybersecurity or security altogether?
So there, I want to say there was no like moment when it dawned on me that okay, cybersecurity is probably the thing that I want to do. So I was kind of into computers from school. When I was introduced to them, my first computer was actually what I had in school. I don't even remember what that program was. It was a very simple uh, drawing program. You just you type instructions like move 30 centimeters and then to
Yeah.
draw on the screen and then turn 45 degrees and then turn and then keep drawing like that. That was I think the first thing that I actually did in high school. Not even high school. I think maybe like I don't know, sixth standard, I want to say. It was really long ago. That was like Windows 95, I think, maybe even. I did Windows 98, maybe. I don't know. I think it was 95. It was really, really long ago. So that, and then I kind of was hooked on the computers from there. I never really had access to a lot of computers until maybe like 7, 8 years after that is when I actually got my first computer when I started high school. I really liked computers. Programming was something that was a lot of. It seemed like I could make the computer do most things if I know how to make it do things. That was something that I really liked about computers. I was kind of hooked onto it. And I think when I got my computer, I started exploring, what else is there in this computer thing? There's programming. Okay, that's great. What else is there? And I think I chanced upon some. I I don't remember exactly what it was. It was some website that talked about computer security, and it had a bunch of material that was freely available. So I was like, this looks interesting. So I just started downloading and started reading it. So I was reading about things like what is a computer network, what is a port, what is a protocol. I have absolutely no idea what any of these things were. I was just reading. And then I ended up on campus. I still had no idea how or what I could do with any of these things. And then I met Vipin sir, and then he says, we have this security team here that take parts in these competitions. I was like, okay, that is pretty cool. Let's see what that is. And then I took part in some of those. That was a lot of fun. I think what I really liked was that I had absolutely no idea what any of these things were, and I was just blown away. It's like I was just reading that specific material and going and saying, and I thought that was just everything. And suddenly, I see this whole security thing, and the boundary just suddenly blew so far away. I was just like, whoa, there's so many cool, exciting things. So then I just started doing that. And then sometime through after that, I kind of became more involved in FOSS Club, doing less of the security stuff until like final year when Sir said, okay, you're from the club and now there are other people who are doing it. So why don't you try running this contest called in CTF, which was the CTF, which is a CTF competition that our university runs for university students, right? So he said, why don't you just try running that? I had no idea. I had taken part in a few CTFs. I had not much of an idea. So he said, just give it a shot, see if you can run it. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I have from the club and that happened to be okay. So let's just give this a shot as well. And I just kind of stuck to security after that, really. I liked the CTF, I liked running it. And then I did my master's in that. And I've been doing security stuff ever since. It kind of just happened. There was no, I was not in search for it, or I had some idea about it, but I was not in search for like, oh yes, this is what I really want to do. I was just like, let's keep exploring. I still think of myself as my primary work is still security. Most of like my research kind of deals with security, but most of the techniques that I'm using actually come from software engineering. It is not a security technique itself. I kind of like to view myself as a more systems person, a computer systems kind of person, as
I
opposed
see.
to computer security kind of person. Because I'm a person who's just motivated by interesting problems and interesting things that you can do. Although I may not know how to do any of them. Like one thing that I really like, which something that Microsoft Research did in India, they built a system which can take a picture of a plant, like some disease affected area of the plant, and use machine learning to identify what disease it might be. So that kind of gives an alerting to the farmers, like, oh look, this plant is affected by this disease, and then they know what corrective action to take. That's cool. That's pretty cool. I like it. I have no idea how to do any of that. I have absolutely no idea of what machine learning is, but I think that's a pretty cool idea. I'm more of a person who's like, oh, this is really cool. This is fascinating to do. And I do it. It's just that security also allows me to do security in many fields. Like I can do security of machine learning. I can do security of phones. I can do security of computer systems. So I'm not tied down to security as such. It's just that I happen to be doing most of my work in security right now, at least.
Mhm.
Ada, so I believe you're currently pursuing your PhD in computer science, right?
Yes.
So you've obviously come a long way. So is there something that you wish that you had known before you started off on this journey? Maybe like
Uh,
advice to your younger self sort of thing.
I kind of like what I did in the FOSS club. I have no. I think most of the things that I did were kind of fine because at that time, this is the only insight that I had. This is all I knew because I had taken very winding career paths. It is not a straight path. Most people who come for a PhD usually come right after undergrad. They just go straight into PhD.
Yeah.
I took a
Oh,
gap year
okay.
in the middle and then did my master's for a few years and then took more gap in the middle and then started my PhD. So it's a kind of went all around the map there, and I found eventually, okay, I really do want to do the PhD. So I think the journey so far, I think I'm fairly happy with the way things turned out because based on how much I knew at that point of time, this is the best that I could do. I think so. I probably wouldn't have done anything differently. Maybe I would have tried to be convinced earlier itself that I wanted to do a PhD so that I could probably be done by now and moving on. But I still think it was the journey itself that brought me to where I am here. So that way, I think, yeah, it just I'm kind of happy with the way things turned out. But there are probably few things that I wish I could have done. I want to say maybe something that at least current people could think of doing. I want to say so. One thing that I never really did in the club was so a lot of people in the club used to stay back during the summer vacation and the winter vacation, just working in the lab, and they used to go home for maybe like 1 or 2 weeks. I never did that. I was never at campus for any of the vacations uh, at all, ever. Like none of them. Now, most people probably were there. I definitely wasn't. I think it was probably not the right thing to do. I think it's a very nice time during summer because I now see it here because summer is like the best time to get a lot of work done. There are no distractions, there are no classes, there are no, you don't have any of those things to distract you from the work that you can do. There are also not many people on campus. It's very, very few people who will be there on campus. Very, very few. So good and it's small, and you'll be like, wow, this is pretty nice place to be when there are not many people. It kind of is a nice environment to keep working on. But regardless, I think the distraction free, like not many other things to worry about. I think that's a very great time when you can do a lot of things. Right? Because you have like the entire week and just only this to do. You don't really have a lot of distractions. I think that is a pretty cool thing. The other thing that I wished I had done was probably get advice from the right people. Like when I started off my BTech, I used to just think that so I don't know. At least the way I was brought up when I was raised is that we always respect elders. We think that they have the right things to say. Whatever they say is usually true. You can take it. You can mostly believe it. And when I get to campus, I kind of followed the same thing. I was listening to what I kind of took some advice from the second years, maybe a few third years. A lot of the advice was good, but also a lot of the advice was not very good. Like one advice that I still distinctly remember I got was, your GPA doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, anybody who gets a 7.5 GPA and anybody who gets a 9 GPA is going to get the same job. So why do you want to put a lot of effort and get a GPA when it doesn't really mean anything? They were not wrong. That was true. Except that, that's not the entire story. you have a really good GPA, that makes you eligible for getting scholarships if you go for, say, a master's or a PhD. And if you have a really good GPA, some companies actually have a minimum cutoff GPA, and if you don't have that, you're not going to be even eligible to attend their interview process, right? That's a big loss.
Yeah.
And if nothing, your GPA is going to be for life. You cannot go
Yeah.
back and change it. So why do you
Right.
want to like not get a good GPA? Be the best that you can get, right? There is still a fine balance also. You don't really need, like, maybe a 9.2 and a 9.4 is probably not very different, right? It's probably very close. But a 9.2 and a 7.5, that's a big difference. So I think that was one of the lessons that I kind of learned a little too late. But then I started making sure I tell other people, whenever I give advice, that's usually what I say, I'm telling you all this, but go ask other people as well, because I may be missing something, right? Because it's important that you ask multiple people and also ask the multiple right people for advice. And if you ask somebody who's just 2 years into the program, their perspective is fairly limited from like someone who's been there for like 7 years or 8 years, right? So the longer you go, the experience that is more important. So I think it's important that you get advice from the right people and not just get random advice from anybody that you want.
Yeah.
Another cool thing that I wish I had done was actually travel, uh, because I don't know. At least right now, there are a lot of people who come from different parts of India and they come to Kerala, and it's probably a place that not many people have been to. I think travel is something that's really something that opens your eyes up. It's a changing experience in its own. You kind of start challenging many of the assumptions that you have about things that you need or things, and that you start realizing that, okay, I can still uh, make do with this even if it's not great. Like most people today probably travel in the third AC compartment in a train, or maybe mostly fly, right? Have you tried traveling in a sleeper compartment, or even better, have you tried actually going in the general, right? It is pretty challenging. I'm not saying it's not, but travel, you kind of see new places and meet new people. That's a perspective that's really changing. It's nothing like, yeah, I don't know. You just have to do it. I'm going to confess that I have not done it. I wished I had done it. When I started working, it was just impossible for me to travel a lot. But I still think that it's a very nice thing that you can do in the club. And the fact that we have so many people from so many different places makes it much easier, right? Like if you're from some really far away place, you can go during the very small breaks that you have to somebody who's from Kerala or from Tamil Nadu, see some of those places. And when you have like a long break, you take all these people who are from here with you to them, and you go to wherever you're from in the northern part or the northeastern part. You guys go explore that place. And I think that's a really nice thing to do. And traveling in a group is even more fun. Trust me. As long as you don't cause any racket and don't cause any trouble for anybody, that's okay. But going as a group, I think is really fun. I think people should really do it. Of course, you can't do it right now, but when things start opening up again, I think that's something you should really consider. And now I think there are a lot of other programs as well where you can like organized tour package kind of thing, but it's not like an actual tour. Like you just go see
Yeah.
tourist spots and stuff. It's more of you go see or experience things like camping at high altitudes, or you go trekking and things like that. Those are all very interesting, fun things to do, right? Because the other thing that if you do in travel is that you learn a lot about the culture that's there all over the
Yeah.
country. And I think culture is something that a lot of people actually don't know much about. Right? And we have just so many diverse kind of practices and stuff. Like I've never been to West Bengal during the Navaratri time. Right? I've heard it's really really good. Because I know people who have been there. They have said, "Do you have all these big statues of the various goddesses there on the street, and everybody can go. It's a celebration really in West Bengal. Like, similarly, different places have different practices, different cultures, different traditions. Going and experiencing all of that, I think that's like a real life-changing thing. But to do that, a very important thing that we need to have is an open mind. That is also something that I slightly was not very open to, because A lot of people who come to Amartha and Amarthapuri, it's like also spiritual place. They have some of these preconceived notions about what things are like, and they have some people had very negative opinions about it. I was kind of new to all of this, meeting various kinds of people with different backgrounds and thought process and stuff. So I kind of got swayed and influenced by them for quite a while until I started exploring things that were actually there in the university and the ashram and all the associated projects and everything that happened. That was pretty cool. You don't necessarily have to believe in all the whole spiritual aspects of things like that, but there are really cool projects involving technology that are done by the university and that's also by the ashram. Like there is the Amachi Labs. I don't know if people know about it. The Amachi Labs is about using technology on how we can probably make things better in villages. Other departments also do it. Like there is Create, which also uses technology for education in areas where schools are not easily accessible. Right? Some of these things, they are all applications of technology to solve real problems that can make a big difference. Right? But if you're not open to seeing what is there, you're not open to seeing the possibilities, you're just going to be closed and shut. That's going to exclude you from experiencing many things. Right? You may not necessarily believe in the mission or anything that's associated with the ashram. I think that's perfectly fine. You don't have to. Right? But if you're not open to the possibility of even exploring it, then you're probably going to miss out on many things. So having an open mind to just experience new things, I think that's very, very important. Otherwise, you're just going to ever not see anything that's going to challenge your assumptions and your views of what the world is like, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point on exploring different cultures. I think on, in addition to sort of having fun and with meeting people and exploring that, I think learning different cultures also helps you communicate with people better, like because you understand their perspective, where they're coming from, and just overall that, if by chance if you like work with them in the company, you know, so you can like collaborate with them in a much better manner because you understand their culture. So I
Yes,
think
but I think
that's
it's also about understanding where you come from. Right here, you kind of see that where what is India really, right? Not a lot of people can really
like
put a finger on it and say, this is,
correct.
you know, there's a lot of things that you can say are very common for different places, which many people should experience. Like I don't know if you've been to Mumbai. Mumbai Metro is like the local trains, as they call it, is really really popular there. Right? A lot of people use it. It has its
Yeah.
own feel for things and stuff. Like you can literally travel in the local train and you will find people cutting vegetables in the train. Yeah,
Oh, really? Okay.
literally because the journey is so long. It's like so far away from the city to where they live that they just sit in the train, just cut the vegetables, so that they're home, they're ready to cook. Right?
Wow.
That's no in Mumbai they would not blink an eye at it for sure. Right? But just somebody from outside, you'll be like, you're cutting vegetables in the train, really? Yeah, because trains are not really not the best in terms of hygiene and things like that. Although things are much much better now, but that's just the way they work. I think that kind of challenges your assumptions. It's like, okay, you can do that also. It's considered acceptable. It just changes your perspective suddenly. You say like, oh yeah, this is something that people reasonably do, and that makes you more open to trying things that you previously think are wrong, or previously
All
think are
right.
not something you should. That doesn't mean that you go start, doing hard drugs or doing alcohol and things. That's not an excuse that you should use to do that. But you should still be use discrimination on what you use this as an excuse to try. But some things I think you should just really give it a shot and it just happens. It's the same way that if you think about, so I don't know if you know, I think some of the other viewers might know, there's this project called Amurta Serve, which had its origins in I want to say 8 years ago when the ashram and the university adopted 101 villages across India, started initiating projects there to sort of build up the village and develop them to, like, they've been ignored a lot. They're not as developed as cities. So a lot of projects now happen in those, and a lot of students also go do stuff there. That is something I think people in FOSS Club should actually give a shot during like the 1 month summer, 2 month summer break that you have for like 3 weeks. Just go and live in a village and do some work there. It doesn't have to be anything related to what you study or anything of that sort. Like you could go there and you could install an electric motor and then get them, or a hydroelectric. You can install a hydroelectric motor there that helps them generate electricity. Some students from the university actually did that some years ago. They went and did it in a village near Amritsar. So those are the kind of things. There are many villages that lots of things are happening. You could just go there and just see what it's like to actually live there. It really changes your perspective. Like I know somebody who once walked all across India, like a few years ago. He literally walked across India, going from village to village. He had actually come to
Mhm.
Amritsar once to meet Amma. Um, so I didn't get to talk to him because he was just somebody who was going to meet her and he was going to leave immediately after he came. I think after he finished the journey, and that's when I saw. Apparently, he had also come before he started. Some of the things that he said, which I heard from other people, is very interesting. He just used to start walking every day, right? And then when he gets tired, he used to be in some village. He'll just find somewhere and he'll just go to sleep. He'd find some villagers who probably give him some food or anything of that sort, and then he'll just sleep somewhere out in the open. Next day, get up, start walking again, right? If we were to start going traveling somewhere, right, the first thing that we do is probably book a hotel, and then we start, planning how we're going to. Are we going to fly, or are we going to take a train, or are we going to drive?
Mhm.
He didn't care. He just went. He found somebody who is at this beginning, I think he was a little hesitant. He wasn't sure what was going to happen, but he just went. As he kept going, he just started seeing how the villagers were, and that really changed his perspective on things. Right? So I think that's a kind of a shift that you sometimes need to challenge some of the notions that you have, that you're used to, that you would find that you can actually survive with much less than what you thought you could. To just give an example.
I
I mean,
was curious, you mentioned about someone who just started walking
mhm.
across India. So, did they set out with a particular intention in mind, or like did they just walk out of their house one day and were like, okay, let's.
So I think his goal was to actually see what India is actually about. I think his goal. Uh, so he I think was someone who is affiliated with some other monastery slash ashram somewhere in India. I'm not entirely sure. I would have to look it up. I think his goal was to sort of learn what the villagers were like. He believes that what actually happens, to get a real picture of India, because mostly we are very from more urban centers where we've seen a more
Mhm.
city-ish, or even if it's a tier 2 city, it's a tier 2 city life that you would have seen. Uh, but a lot of things still happen in villages. Majority of the work still happens in a lot of these villages. It's a completely different life, I think, and just going and experiencing those. And there are still some of these places that you can see if you go to some parts of Kerala. Many of these people who are not from primary cities or even the tier 2 cities, you'll find that the life there is really very different. If you're interested, you should read about the founder of Zoho. Anybody who's listening also
Mhm.
should check it out. There's a company called Zoho. It was founded in India. It's founded by this person called Sridhar Vembu. He's now, I think, a national advisor for the government of India. He set up his office in a village. He said, "We are going to go do it in a village. We are not going to go to Bangalore or Chennai and wait." They did it. They did it in a village, some like 150 kilometers from Chennai, literally in the middle of nowhere. Where if you walk out of the office, you just see farm. Lots of green farms, and
Mhm.
but Zoho was very very successful. They're a very popular company, and his thing has been like a lot of the strength is still there in the villages. We can actually leverage many of that. But you don't even have to go into, getting into other villages. You just go there and experience what it's like. I think it is a really life-changing experience. I kind of wish I had done it, but of course, when I was studying, this project wasn't even there. It started after I graduated. So now I think students should consider doing it if just go for 3 weeks. You don't have to go more than that. And just see what happens. It probably will change you.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it'd be
think
nice to do
amFOSS
that.
has still
Yeah.
retains giving back to society aspect. Like even if it's not necessarily like spirituality, like even with the COVID-19 pandemic, we actually made
Yeah.
these bots which make like information accessible, and like the team Ayud actually has
Hmm.
used those bots, and
Mhm.
it's actually been helpful to people. And yeah,
Yeah, I remember seeing that on the Twitter account.
yeah,
Yeah.
and even mental health apps, Relive, I believe it's
Mhm.
called. Yeah,
Yeah, we
they developed
recently, yeah, some of the people in the club were working on it.
Mhm.
And I think we've gotten to a stage that where it can be used.
Yeah, I'm
So
actually happy that these kind of things are happening because this is not something that was happening when I was there. So I think that's a really good sign that the club is just growing and exploring new things. And I think eventually, with time, people will also start exploring more things. It's going to be a natural progression. I was just saying it so that some people start doing it right now because sometimes we just need to kickstart something, and then a few years down the line, it just becomes really big and just takes off after that.
yeah, I think also another part, it would be exciting to go to these villages if we ever get like a chance to travel, right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually something that some students do. So you should definitely consider going somewhere and seeing what life there can be like. It can be pretty surprising.
Yeah. So it's been an hour. Eta, I'm sure you're busy. Do you want to wrap it up?
Sure, we can do it. I'm still happy to keep chatting, but
Probably, I think one last question that
Mhm.
I'd like to ask Heta was: is there any kind of future advice or any advice that you'd like to give to the viewers that are watching, primarily students who are currently in this pandemic? So, anything that you'd
Mhm.
like to get advice?
So one thing that I always keep telling everybody, no matter which when you start studying, is try to kind of prioritize skills or seeking immediate successes, right? uh, because I mean it's not bad. Chasing achievements is definitely not a problem. But the thing is that sometimes we tend to get lost in those achievements that we forget why we were doing those in the first place. Like actually, getting selected for GSOC and completing the GSOC Google Summer of Code project. For those of you who may be listening who don't know, Google Summer of Code is like a summer internship program kind of thing that Google runs, where they pay you to contribute to an open source software. It's a great experience. You write a proposal, select an idea, explore a code base that you don't know, talk to mentors over IRC or Slack or Element Chat, whatever is the in communication channel today, and write a proposal about what you would like to do. Getting selected for Google Summer of Code, yeah, it's all fantastic. But sometimes people forget that that's not essentially the focus of the club. It's about building skills as opposed to enriching your resume, if you want to say it in some way, right? Because you can have a lot of achievements and things like that, a small achievements, but that may mean that you don't have a lot of good skills. It's important to like stay focused and build a lot of skills. If you start participating in several competitions that are not very related to each other, it's like you're digging to find water, except you start digging, you know, 10 centimeters in one place, and then you go to another place and you start digging another 10 centimeters, and then another 10 centimeters, and so on, as opposed to digging like in one specific place trying to find water, right? So
Mhm.
try to be focused on, or at least don't lose focus on the fact that you're here to develop your skills. Right? That's something that I think gets lost sometimes. To use Fast Club as an opportunity to like not just develop skills, but also try to develop as a person, right? Uh, Challenge assumptions that you have, try to embrace uh, failures, throwing yourself out of comfort zones, try to explore things, try to take calculated risks. And sometimes when you're not sure, just say yes to things. And, if it seems to be okay, just try giving it a shot. Who knows what would happen? Like, I can give a small story for this. So Vipin sir has been telling us for quite a while that we should probably go start talking at conferences because we have been doing a lot of work, and most of us were not very, like we used to speak in the club and we can do all that, but like why should we go speak at a conference? There are many people. It's just, I think it's some reluctance slash some fear kind of thing. So finally I said, okay, fine, I'm going to bite the bullet and I'm going to go do it. So I said, yeah, okay, sir, I'm applying for it. He said, yeah, okay, good, you go apply. I just applied for it. I had no idea if I'd get selected or anything. And finally, I did get selected. So that was to FOSDEM. Some of you might have heard of it. It's an open source conference that happens in Belgium every year. So I got selected to speak at FOSDEM in 2014. So I was like, yeah, okay, let's just go give a talk. So I go there. I gave a talk. It was kind of a disaster in some ways because as soon as I connected my computer to the projector there, my computer just crashed. Apparently, there was some kernel bug which made my computer not work with that projector. That was super fun, and I had to borrow someone else's computer and set everything up in 10 minutes to start doing it. But the presentation kind of went off fine. There was also another person who was also from sort of a security CTF background who was also attending the conference. I happened to know he was there. So I sent him an email saying, we should probably, I'm anyway going there, so might as well, why not meet this person? So we met, we had a chat for maybe like 10 or 20 minutes. And then we kind of stayed in touch on and off after that, not very regular, I want to say. And then, 5 years later after that, I come here to do my PhD, and guess who's my advisor? Who's that very same person? I mean, yeah, it's just
What
like,
are the odds?
yeah, so he joined here, and I know he joined here. So I asked him, hey, are you looking for PhD students? And he's like, yeah, I'm looking for PhD students. Do you want to come here? Like, yeah, okay. If you're ready to take me, I definitely love to work on you. And then, like, 5 months later, I'm here doing a PhD with a person that I randomly met at a conference some 4 or 5 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah, sometimes you just say yes to things, it just happens. You just don't really know, right? So you take some risks. Sometimes you get out of the comfort zone. Good things like this might happen. Who knows? It doesn't necessarily mean that everything is like that, but unless you really take the chance, you won't know whether anything is going to happen. That's why you need to kind of be ready to deal with failures. It happens in life. You have to have that way to deal with things and deal with circumstances and adapt. And lastly, while you're doing all of this, make sure that you take care of yourself. It's something especially during this time in the pandemic because we are stuck at home most of the time. We're just sitting in front of the computer most of the time. You should take care of your physical health. You should take care of your mental health. Do some exercise. It's something that we kind of neglected kind of early on in the club, but eventually we started doing some of it. People go for playing some sports, playing some exercise or something like that once every week. I think it's important that you be regular in doing some kind of an exercise that keeps you healthy physically and also kind of mentally also strong. It can be anything that you like, do any exercise, or you want to learn yoga and meditation. Sure, that's great. You just want to go running, gonna go bicycling, you want to do swimming, do whatever you like. I would advise avoid going to the gym if you can. There's nothing inherently wrong with going to the gym, but try to spend some time in nature doing whatever exercise that you do. I think that's a big change in rejuvenating you rather than stuck inside one room where you're just with other people who are all just exercising and you're just plugged in listening to some music while you're doing the exercise. Keep all that away and just go do something in nature. I think that's a really great thing if you can do. Take care of both of these aspects because few years down the line it will probably come back to affect you if you neglect it. That's mostly the advice I think I would give to new people who are considering joining.
Yeah, I think that's very relevant advice to all of
Yeah.
us, especially with COVID. Like, we tend to get carried away with, okay, our college work and after that club work, and like, we don't really schedule any time for like taking care of our health. Like, so we have to make a conscious effort, like, okay, I'm going to spend this much time outside taking a walk or meditating or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anything that you're comfortable, but it's important that you do it every day, if possible, at least every day. Because if you cannot get a break for one day, you'll be like, okay, we'll do it tomorrow and we'll do it tomorrow. And then before you know, the week could have gone by when you didn't do it. And then it's very hard to get back into doing. So discipline helps in that aspect. You should really try to stick to doing it every day. You might still not be able to do it every day, but at least try to make sure that you are at least regular every day and get things done.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's great to have a routine, I guess, especially in the pandemic when we're sitting in front of our computers 24/7.
Yes.
So it's nice to get up once in a while. It's great advice.
That's all I had to say. Unless you had any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we
Is
can.
there anything you'd like to add, Anushka?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think
Okay.
that's what I wanted to ask.
We'll wrap it up. So, Ada, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be a guest on our podcast. It was honestly really eye opening to hear about your experiences in the club and like how you got started with cybersecurity and also like the skills that you acquired from the club and your experiences with traveling. I'm sure I speak for all of our listeners when I say that it was a pleasure having you as a guest on our podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm just really happy to be here. It's always nice to talk to people, reflect back on how things were, so that, like you said, learn from the people who have already walked the path to see how you can walk that path better.
Right?
Hopefully, we can have more episodes like this if that would be
Yeah,
useful.
definitely. We would love
Definitely.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
everyone.
much, Eta.